we're in the middle of not just a health crisis, but an economic crisis and now a social crisis as well, as protests continue across the country over racial injustice, police brutality, the death of George Floyd. I know that these are issues that you're extremely passionate about. What can we do to change? What are you doing to change? And how do we hold ourselves, our companies, and our leaders accountable?
I think the most important thing for every company, and actually not just a company, just people in general, is to take a step back and actually recognize that whether we realize it or not, we're doing something wrong. And the most important thing we need to first do is recognize that there's an issue and then listen and hear the stories. Like, as I've been hearing stories, like, I feel awful in that there's been this systemic problem, and even within the company, that we haven't necessarily addressed. It was just sort of accepted. So we put out an email. I very publicly came out and said, look, we have a problem, and that I have no one who is Black who is over director level or above, or on my board. And that's an issue that we need to change. So we focus now on, identifying these 4 pillars of what is it that we can potentially do. The first one being hiring. What's our hiring practice? And is the funnel wide enough? Because LinkedIn says that over 70% of people come from a network, a connection. So we all have to broaden our connections. Second is the employee experience. Are we doing things within the company that potentially are creating microaggressions that don't create a safe space for people? Are there things that we're doing? And we have found, yes, there are things that we can actually improve on. Third is the community impact. Are we supporting the pipeline of people who could potentially come to the company? And are we supporting a diverse pipeline? And second, am I partnering with companies that also have diversity? I can make decisions about who I do research with, who I buy supplies with, and are all those partners also accountable? And do they have diversity there? And last is looking at our own product and recognizing that our product is relatively Eurocentric right now, and we have an opportunity to broaden that to support all populations.
Meantime, it's certainly not just a 23andMe problem. It's an America problem. It is a Silicon Valley problem. I mean, specifically with regard to this crisis, we've seen, big tech companies from Google to Facebook, problems with misinformation about COVID-19, and yet so important in keeping us all connected as we shelter in place. So important to, share these stories, these devastating and passionate stories of change happening across the country. How do we find a balance for these companies in terms of using their power for good and curbing power when necessary?
That is a tricky question. And I think that there's a lot. In some ways, I think every company has the spotlight shining on them right now about what do they stand for. And I think it's going to be really important to, I think about this a lot. What are the decisions that we're making today that we'll look back on and say, were we part of the future? Did we do things that actually help set up the right kind of future that we all want? So I think there's a lot of, looking at how is it that we are managing this incredible amount. Again, it's never happened before. The amount of data coming in online and all the discussions is a challenging problem. But I think companies, like I said, have a responsibility to recognize what do they stand for.
Do you think that COVID has changed your trajectory as a company at all? And if so, how?
I think COVID has changed 23andMe in the capacity that people are recognizing 2 things. One, the importance of prevention, because you can't easily go for months. We couldn't easily go to the doctor. So 23andMe is a lot about, identity, learning about your genetics, learning about your health risks. But the reason to learn about your health risks is because there's an opportunity to prevent disease. And so we've seen our customers are engaged, and there's been a resurgence of people logging in and coming in and wanting to think about what is it that they're at risk for, and are there actions they can take now? Second, I think that fundamentally healthcare is changing because of the boom in telemedicine. And one thing that we've always said is that the old days were about a one-to-one connection between you and the doctor. And frankly, those days are over. You have to find additional ways to get care. And is that going to be through online? Is that through a group setting? Is it through telemedicine? Is it chat bots that are coming? So there's always going to be a need where you have to connect with a physician in person, but there's a whole opportunity for keeping people well at home that can leverage the internet and telemedicine and this sort of remote connection opportunities.
What are your biggest concerns, Anne? Obviously, there are so many, we're going through so many things right now, whether it's, the health crisis, the economy, layoffs, people fighting for jobs across the country, these protests. As we come out of this and start to look at kind of a new normal, we've got about 30 seconds left. What are your sort of biggest concerns about lessons we might not actually learn here?
I think I tend to be an optimistic individual, and I frankly feel optimistic because there is so much unrest and change and everything. There's a massive upheaval going on. So frankly, the world is going to be different. And what I think the most about, it's our opportunity to lose. So we got to make those changes.